No position is being devalued as much as running back in 2024. There's undoubtedly going to be a few of those running backs who absolutely smash their ADP. We're breaking down 9 running backs with Hayden Winks of Underdog Fantasy to decide if they're undervalued, overvalued, and if you should be targeting them to win big in 2024. Hayden, we know that redraft leagues aren't going to reflect best ball ADP, and we've been so focused on best ball ADP for a while. The running backs are going to get pushed up earlier. How are you feeling about this position group as a whole as we stand just before training camp kicks off?
It's still not as strong as it was 5 years ago when we felt like we had all these guys in their absolute prime. But we at least have the players like Breece Hall, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyren Williams came out of nowhere where it looks better than it did the previous season to me. So I've been just gobbling up all the lower ADP. I'm loading up on running backs way. I'll have like 4 by round 8, round 9, which I've like basically have never done before, and then circle back to the other position. So we still have to draft the good ones. It's still the most important or second most important position in fantasy, depending on the scoring settings. So I don't want to completely punt it off. Sometimes I will if the board falls directly to me, but a lot of the times I want to look at the kind of round 3, round 4 running backs because previously we would have all been drafting them at the round 1-2 turn.
Yeah, and Rich, I know you've been busy in the Dynasty streets as always, kind of being reawoken with all these redraft charity leagues that we've been doing. How are you finding that adjustment to the current running back landscape?
Yeah, Dynasty over the past couple of years has basically just reflected redraft when it comes to running back rankings. You know, I think people are so in that what have you done for me lately kind of valuation of running backs in Dynasty. So there's no huge difference. So at the running back position, it's pretty much same old, to be honest. I think I talked about it in the show we just released a couple of days ago with Pat Fitzmaurice about the running back position and how we had a couple of poor draft classes. You think of the Najee Harris, Travis Etienne one, and there was no real depth there. And that's kind of killed us a little bit over the past few years in fantasy. Luckily, last year we saw some pretty good options, especially as Hayden said, with Kyren Williams kind of appearing out of nowhere. And hopefully we can get some value from this year's draft class, although I'm slightly less hopeful than I was certainly in 2023.
Hayden, we're going to start with a player who's consistently polarizing, Josh Jacobs, using the Fantasy Life ADP grid for underdog ADP. We can see that Josh Jacobs goes at pick 53 overall. He's the RB12 on your site. Meanwhile, on Sleeper and Redraft ADP, he goes as the RB11, but goes 26 picks earlier, 27 picks earlier, which tells you everything about how wide receiver hungry underdog is this year. Much as we all love it, it is a bit crazy. He got the contract that on the surface of things looks like a decent deal. 4 years, 48 millions. But we know the Packers don't always guarantee that much money into the future, so it's possibly not quite as big as it looks on the surface. He's coming off career low in yards after contact per attempt last year, had only 9 runs over 10 yards. You know, balancing that against the fact that he could be the clear running back 1 in Green Bay. Are you buying in at these prices, or are you calling him overvalued?
He's one of my highest drafted players. So I think the first thing we need to talk about is 2 years ago, he was basically the guy you needed. So like we've seen this before. Josh Jacobs has been the guy you needed in fantasy at a sunk cost. We've seen him have an efficient season. Last year was a total disaster. Wasn't there in training camp. The Raiders were obviously really bad. The Raiders offensive line in particular was way worse than it was. They, at least a couple years ago, like early on in his career, they had like a really good center. They had some good tackle play. The last season, that was just not the case. And players like David Montgomery, for example, they were caught in a really bad Bears situation. All of a sudden, they go to a good offensive line, good offensive environment in Detroit, and then all of a sudden, their efficiency rebounds. I have a lot of faith with the Packers. I think a lot of the running back stuff is, do you have the ability to handle a bunch of volume? Josh Jacobs led the NFL in carries just 2 seasons ago. We know he's a volume guy. It's one of the first things that they said about Josh Jacobs when they signed him is he can handle a huge workload. Then the second part is, how good is the team? The Packers, from like week 12 through the end of the season, including the playoffs, they were the second best team in EPA per play. They draft the first round offensive lineman. This year, they're just always doing better than what the kind of skilled talent seems because Matt LaFleur is such a good offensive play caller. We saw Aaron Jones once he came back from his own injury last season. He had elite running back usage down the stretch. So in terms of volume, I have faith in Jacobs. In terms of environment, I have a ton of faith in the Packers. And if we can kind of put those best seasons together for Josh Jacobs, I think he'd be one of the most the highest upside players, not even just in the 5th and 4th round, but like of fantasy period. Like the Packers could be that good on offense, especially once we kind of consider how that kind of coaching scheme is changing. Like we saw with Sean McVay, they were kind of an outside zone team with Todd Gurley. Then last year with Kyren Williams, they became a duo team, run right at you because they have light boxes. I think that's what the Packers are going to be trying to do here. They were an outside zone team with Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones. Now they want to go right at you because now they can spread teams open and everyone's playing 2 high shells. They have the wide receiver depth and Jordan Love to make it work. And now they need someone to run right at you. And I think that's what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs this year. So I'm buying it. I know that the efficiency is worrisome for some, but I just think that the Packers environment's going to kind of handle all of that.
How much are you worried about the fact that over the years, Matt LaFleur has used 2 running back systems to the point that he kept Derrick Henry off the field because he was using Dion Lewis? Like, is that something that bothers you too much, or do you think that Josh Jacobs is going to be a lot better than Marshawn Lloyd is?
So I think we can kind of use that in 2 different ways. That Derrick Henry season, that was when he was a rookie. So you're keeping the really good rookie on the bench. Isn't that kind of what's going to happen with Marshawn Lloyd here? Like, I think that's kind of the angle I'm taking with that. And Dion Lewis coming off a good season. That was Derrick Henry rookie year. So, and that was also so long ago. And I think that LaFleur wants to use 2 running backs because the entire league basically does that. But also Aaron Jones is like nowhere near as big as Josh Jacobs. And Aaron Jones has never been Mr. Workload at any point in his career. That's exactly what Josh Jacobs does. So I don't know. Like, they gave him a lot of money and they did not have to cut Aaron Jones this offseason. Like, they did that for a reason. And they thought that Josh Jacobs was an upgrade. I think I keep going back to the skill set thing where I think the style of runs the Packers want to do this year is going to be more north-south than it has ever been before. And that's just because we saw Sean McVay do that. And obviously LaFleur and McVay are very close and had a ton of success. And even with Christian McCaffrey, a lot more north-south runs than we kind of seen from that scheme when it was Raheem Mostert and everyone going to the edge. So I think that this tree is kind of focusing in on a certain type of running back. And I think that Josh Jacobs is going to be able to handle that. And if the Packers are turned into another top 5 offense, like we saw in glimpses last year, I don't see why Josh Jacobs can't be like a top 5 running back.
Nice. Rich, how are you feeling about Jacobs?
Yeah, I really like him. I think Hayden made some fantastic points. I think, on the Aaron Jones point about, him being a smaller back, missing time. He's missed time in 5 of the last 7 seasons for the Packers. Like, he is often injured. Josh Jacobs is not that guy, and I think that he can carry that full workload. On the contract, I think the interesting thing is the way the Packers structure it. They're much like the Bengals in that they don't like guaranteeing money into year 2 and beyond. But that basically means for Josh Jacobs, this is essentially a series of 1-year deals. The Packers can save money moving on from him after this season. So, if you want to buy into that contract year narrative, I know, Tom, you did an article about it, and he is playing for that future money. He is playing for his livelihood moving forward. And I think the other thing around the offensive line, look, this is potentially one of the better offensive lines if you remove the left tackle. I think I've got a massive question about, a 7th round sophomore pick that's going to be starting at left tackle. But outside of that, I think the other 4 guys are going to be very good. And, yes, that's a big issue potentially for the passing game. But what's the least important offensive line position for the run game is the left tackle. So I'm not worried about that impact on Josh Jacobs. And I think that could be really interesting. And, if the left tackle is struggling, maybe that means we're going to lean more on Josh Jacobs, that veteran back, in for pass pro rather than the rookie who we know rookies tend to struggle in pass pro. That could mean Josh Jacobs gets more time in those obvious passing situations, which could mean more dump offs, more receiving work, and could be really exciting for his fantasy value.
That was going to be my last note, Rich, was in these like press conferences that have been going viral as like the reason why we should be drafting Marshawn Lloyd, which I agree. It's all the same reasons I'm talking about with Josh Jacobs. The offense could be so good. That's the reason why I'm also drafting Marshawn Lloyd. But in those same press conferences, LaFleur keeps saying, I want Josh Jacobs to catch more passes than he ever has done before. Those tweets never go viral. That's kind of interesting how those ones never go viral. Everyone says we need the legendary season. We need to catch passes. The coach says we need him to catch passes. That seems pretty promising to me. So yeah, he's not going to have 80% of the snaps. Very few running backs do. This could be 65-30 in favor of Josh Jacobs. But Marshawn Lloyd to me was a explosive runner, very intriguing, high upside, but also low floor just because of how chaotic of a rusher he is, in my opinion. And I'm not sure how, like, if he's going to be like the most trustworthy rookie out there, at least early on in the season. So as long as Josh Jacobs is motivated and healthy, I think the offensive line difference between the Packers and the Raiders last year is going to take really kind of silence a lot of like the efficiency concerns. And I think it's going to be on Marshawn Lloyd to earn playing time. And I think that he'll be able to do that. But we've seen a lot of third round running backs kind of just disappear.
We got lots more to get into, but if you're finding us for the first time, hit the subscribe button. Loads more redraft, loads of best ball content, and loads of dynasty content right here. We are closing in on 2,500 subscribers. All you got to do is hit that button. Rich, DeAndre Swift, RB21 on Sleeper, RB26 on Underdog, goes at pick 68 on Sleeper, picks 93 on Underdog. So again, a decent gap between them. And this is going to be indicative of what redraft leagues are like compared to best ball. Swift, he joined the Bears off career highs in receptions, yards per game, and games played. Are you buying in at either of these values?
No, not at all. I can't get on board with Swift. I just can't get my head around it. This is a guy that's missed time, that has shown, some incredible flashes in the open field, but struggles to run between the tackles, has had, his physicality questioned by pretty much every running back coach he's ever had. And we're drafting him at a point where he's never produced greater than I think RB18 season through his career, and yet we're drafting him in around that point. I just can't get my head around it. He's potentially going to share a backfield with Khalil Herbert, who I think is a much better running back in terms of rushing the ball, and Roschon Johnson, who, he didn't do what people hoped last year, but I think is a competent complementary weapon in the offense. I just can't get my head around where the value in Swift is. People are talking about his receiving ability and ability in space, and it's like, this is an offense that's got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet. Are we really expecting DeAndre Swift to see the 60, 70 targets that he would need to pay off his ADP? I just can't get my head around it. And the only thing is that the Bears went out and prioritized Swift and threw a load of money at him. And that's kind of the one thing that's maybe holding me back a little bit. But I just don't like the player, and the price for me is astronomical.
Yeah, Hayden, where are you at on Swift? I saw you nodding a lot, so I feel like you're on the same page.
Yeah, I have him as my running back 31, but I have him completely buried in my overall rankings. There's like a tier break to me of the running backs, like David Montgomery goes one round earlier. If things break his way, the Lions are projected for the second most points in the league. I've seen David Montgomery like maintain a big workload. I would rather just pay up a round than get to probably a much lower upside offense. Like if Caleb Williams is as good as I think he is, the Bears should be around like an average offense. Maybe they can kind of flirt with top 10, but to get to where the Lions were, that would be asking for a whole lot. And I think Rich nailed it in that I just no longer know what Swift is like supposed to be really good at, because you can design him receptions, sure, but he's not trusted in pass protection. Roschon Johnson, for my money, has about as good a feel for pass protection and when to get out to the flats than just about anybody. And he proved that as a rookie last year. So I think he's going to be on the field for third downs. I don't know why you would design a screen to DeAndre Swift when you have three monsters at wide receiver. So Khalil Herbert's going to be involved as well. So I think it's going to be a 3-back rotation on an average offense. And I just want to like have better paths to upside. Like, look, James Conner, way clearer path. We've seen him be able to do it. Jalen Warren, if Najee Harris misses time, Zamir White. I think like these guys, I would just rather chase somebody that I think they have a better chance of getting like 18 touches per game. That's just like never been DeAndre Swift.
So if Khalil Herbert was moved, which is the popular trade that everybody on fantasy Twitter seems to want to happen, How far up would you move DeAndre Swift at all? Because I spoke to Andrew Erickson on my podcast Fantasy Pros this week about how if DeAndre Swift went, I'm not sure I'd really move. Sorry, if Khalil Herbert went, I'm not sure I would move DeAndre Swift up much at all. But Roshan Johnson would be looking at maybe a 30 spot bump.
Yeah, that seems about right. I'd move him up a little bit, but I haven't I'm not sure if I've drafted him a single time this year. Like I've done like 80 drafts. I haven't drafted him a single time, so maybe I'd mix him in a little bit. But I don't know why the Bears would want to trade Khalil Herbert. Like DeAndre Swift misses time annually. He's not trusted ever. Khalil Herbert is really cheap, and he's kind of decent. That feels like a player that you want to keep. So I think that is just be a 3-back committee, and in half PPR and especially in best ball, we need like real upside. So like get out of here with the committees, get out of here with offenses that could be like average, maybe a little bit below average. So there's just more upside with players like on the screen.
I think if Khalil Herbert was traded, I'd probably be comfortable taking DeAndre Swift about where he's going now.
Yeah.
The problem is that if Khalil Herbert was traded, DeAndre Swift's going up 2, 3, probably 4 rounds in ADP, isn't he?
Ugh. Yeah, I don't want any of that. Okay, well, if you're watching this and you're high on DeAndre Swift, let us know in the comments below. I want to believe. Give me a reason to draft him. Dwayne McFarland on the channel for a best ball draft last week, and he still believes in him, but I'm not convinced. So let's move on. Isiah Pacheco is the RB10 on Underdog, RB12 on Sleeper, going at 33rd overall in Redraft and 43rd in Best Ball. The unquestioned running back 1 in Kansas City. The Chiefs, they brought in J.K. Dobbins, took one look at his knees and instead brought back a guy who's failed over the course of his career, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Pacheco, he's averaged over 4.6 yards per carry in both of his seasons, had 44 receptions last year, in a team which wasn't at its best. Hayden, I feel like Pacheco's best ball ADP is going to rise between now and the start of the season. Is that what you're expecting?
I have him 28th overall, so I'm well ahead. He's one of my highest drafted players. We've been doing a little series on our show where we have fantasy analysts that just pick any 5 players that you're drafting a ton and talk them up. That's the only point of the show. Many of them have already picked Isiah Pacheco. So yeah, I think that this one will go up, and I think rightfully so. There's a chance he becomes a bell cow, and there's really not many bell cows in the league. From week 12 through the Super Bowl, he averaged 18 expected half PPR points. That would have been RB3 overall if we extrapolated that throughout the entire season. That's a huge sample because it went all the way through the Super Bowl, and that was because Jerick McKinnon wasn't around, and Jerick McKinnon's not going to be around anymore. So they haven't added any depth behind him. And Pacheco has been a frustrating rusher, just like based off of his talent. But I think that he's gotten better and more experience over the last couple of years, and he's earning the trust of Andy Reid. So I think there's a chance where the Chiefs score the most points in the NFL this year, and Pacheco plays 72% of the snaps. And I mean, how bad would you have to be to bust off of that? Especially because the Chiefs also have one of the best offensive lines in football. So yeah, to me, this is like an absolute layup. And this is like kind of the range where I think that the underdog drafters drafting the wide receivers instead of this tier of running backs, I think like this is where I disagree with the most. Like I don't want the wide receiver 2-3 tiers priced next to like somebody who I think is going to be an RB1. So like Terry McLaurin versus Isiah Pacheco, like to me, those are like in completely different stratospheres when it comes to the potential upside. How the hell is Terry McLaurin going to be a top 20 fantasy player this year? I can easily show you how Isiah Pacheco is going to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you can make the case for definitely a few guys in that range where there starts to be question marks in the ADP. Rich, where are you at on Pacheco?
I kind of like him at cost. I think there's some concerns around the overall receiving workload. I don't know if he's going to be able to command more than probably sort of 50, 60 targets, whereas other guys in this sort of range, I see that potential high receiving ceiling. But, 43% of times finished as an RB1 last year. I think there's a lot to love. This offense we know is going to score points, but also what the moves they've made in the offseason, I think is a real help for Pacheco in terms of, we talk so much about the Chiefs seeing that too high shell and the blanket coverage and teams trying to take away those explosives. Well, they've added the fastest wide receiver ever in Xavier Worthy. They've added Hollywood Brown, who we know can get deep. I think that's going to force even more options out of the box, which could potentially open up rushing lanes for Isiah Pacheco. So, yeah, I kind of like him at cost. I'd say he's properly rated in terms of my thoughts.
Tyjae Spears, RB26, ADP aligns on both underdog and sleeper. When you get to this range of the draft, the ADP does tend to get a lot closer for a lot of them. I think when you look at this scenario of the draft where I want to be taking a lot of running backs, I did a video recently and I've come to term this area of the draft running back glory hole, because for years there's just so many players coming out of this area and doing amazing. You can check out that video by clicking on this one after the video has finished. So RB36 on sleeper, but RB26 on underdog, despite the fact that their ADP aligns. Spears, he had a good rookie year, ranked third among rookie running backs in catches with 49, second in team target share at 14.9%, fourth in total yardage. It felt like Mike Vrabel trusted Tyjae Spears. He was putting him on the field whenever Derrick Henry needed a breather, no matter the situation. This is a new coaching staff. They moved fairly quickly for Tony Pollard. This feels like the poster boy for an ambiguous backfield in 2024. Rich, I know going back to early part of this year, you were quite high on Spears. But as we turn our attention to redraft now that Tony Pollard's there, at this price, are you in or out on him?
I'm kind of out. I think that I was massive into Tyjae Spears and I loved what he did as a rookie, the amount of snaps that he saw sharing a backfield with Derrick Henry. And I was really excited about the potential he did. But the fact that they went out and threw money at Tony Pollard, who is essentially the same player, I think they are so similar in terms of their usage, what they do well. It seriously concerns me, because I'm like, if you wanted what you've got in Tony Pollard and you valued it in Tyjae Spears, why would you go out and get Tony Pollard? I can't quite get my head around having two identical backs in a backfield. And when it's a new regime, I'm thinking they're going to essentially trust the guy that they've brought in rather than the guy they were handed. So I'm leaning more towards Tony Pollard in this range. So I just can't get on board with Tyjae Spears at the current cost.
How about you, Hayden?
I see it pretty much similarly. I haven't drafted either of the Titans running backs. Like, to me, this is sort by projected points, and the Titans are bottom 5 in projected points. Sort by offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines out there. Sort by snaps and overall touches. These guys, I think, are going to be about where they're drafted. I think there's a chance that either one of these guys finishes a round higher than where they're being drafted right now. I struggle to see the upside where like Tyjae Spears or Tony Pollard become like a top 15 running back just because of, like, quite frankly, Will Levis. And then the other thing is I think that this staff is going to pass the ball a ton. So, and I'm not sure if I'm going to copy paste Tyjae Spears like per snap metrics over to that, because now you're adding in Calvin Ridley into the mix as well. So this is just one of those where in half PPR, I need touchdowns, and I just have no confidence that either Pollard or Tyjae Spears is going to be the one to command a ton of them. And I really don't see the Titans like being a team that's going to be down the red zone very often anyways.
Yeah, I mean, why draft Tyjae Spears or Tony Pollard when you can take Brian Robson, whose ADP sits right in the middle of them, and for me is a much easier bet. Kendre Miller goes at RB44 in sleeper ADP, pick 144, RB40, and pick 142 on underdog. So again, very close, but a bit of a difference in terms of the RB positional value. Didn't show an awful lot in his rookie year, averaged 3.0 yards per carry in his fantasy relevant games. But then had a really nice week 18 game against Atlanta, 13 for 73, 5.6 yards per carry, as well as a 31-yard reception. We know how important rookie off seasons are to first-year players, and his was marred by injuries. So now he seems to be healthy. Alvin Kamara seems unhappy with everything that's going on there. He wants more money on his contract. Jamal Williams, Hayden, I know that you loved Jamal Williams, but he didn't show much at all last year. So do you think Kendre can bounce back?
I think we've seen the best of Jamal Williams, and that was the best when he had Dan Campbell out there to polish off all those
Yeah.
touchdowns. Yeah. So with Alvin Kamara's contract, there is a little bit of room where if they wanted to just like say see ya, they could do that. So there is like a little bit, let's say a 5% chance where like they just like trade him or cut him and then Kendre Miller becomes the guy. I also think that the odds that Alvin Kamara is just totally dusted is pretty high too at this point. So I think they're going to give Kendre Miller a chance. I don't think there was like anything on the tape to kind of tell me if he's good or bad. It was kind of a mixed bag. So to go back to it, I just really struggle with the Saints offense in general. Like their offensive line, like in terms of tackles, the 2 starting tackles, maybe the worst in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
New coaching staff is promising, but like Kubiak, like that's like really going to be the guy that's going to move the needle for us. Really, I'm not sure about that. So I have some struggles with the Saints in general. He to me is like the Ty Chandlers and Zach Charbonnets, like kind of in that tier, and at least I've seen it with those types before. So I haven't been clicking his name a ton. It's not that I think he's like some brutal pick. I would just rather be like, oh, I've seen Tyler Algier be pretty good in football, so I'd rather just like take him as kind of like the handcuff.
Yeah, Rich, like, do you kind of align with Hayden on that, or do you think maybe Kendre Miller is going to be one of those guys like Zamir White where we see nothing from him, but then if there's a situation where he ends up getting a lot of touches, he could actually be fairly good for fantasy?
Yeah, I hate to feel like I'm just agreeing with everything Hayden's saying, but yeah, I don't really see what there is to love. This is, we got the same bodies in the backfield as last year. Okay, we're 1 year on, but he didn't see more than a 36% snap share in any game last year. That game where he produced in week 18 was a 31-point blowout by the Saints. Like, there was a reason why he was in at the end of the game and just seeing handoff after handoff. And it's like, when a team's losing by 31 points, are we really putting any stock into what the defense is doing, what that game means?
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly not. So I just think that, yeah, maybe there's a world where he pays off ADP, but I think if I'm looking at 2 things for a flyer. Are they going to get receiving work? Are they going to get touchdowns? And it's like, I can't see a world unless there's an Alvin Kamara injury that he gets the receiving work, and I can't see the world unless there's a Jamal Williams and a Alvin Kamara injury that he gets the goal line work. So
and Taysom Hill.
That as well. Yeah. So yeah, I'd much rather just, as you say, target other guys in this backfield. Give me a Rico Dowdle or Zach Charbonnet, someone like that.
Yeah, he's my RB46. And if you want access to my rankings for best ball and redraft, Rich's Dynasty rankings, exclusive discounts, listen leagues, and much more, hit the join button down below. Jump into one of the fastest growing Discords around the fantasy football community. Loads of extra stuff in there. Zach Moss, RB30 on Sleeper, RB25 on Underdog, similar in ADP again, right around the 94th, 95th pick. We've got a 2-headed backfield in Cincinnati, but it feels like this one could go either way. The Chase Brown experience boiled down to a couple of highlight reel plays, 33 rush attempts, and 13 targets across the whole of last season. He did lead all running backs in yards per target, but the Bengals still sought to bring in Zach Moss off what was a massive bounce back year for him. He had just shy of 1,000 all-purpose yards, is only 26 years old. Rich, how are you playing this backfield?
I think I want as many pieces of this backfield as possible. I think this is a prime kind of ambiguous backfield. Both guys are cheap. I think there's a world where both could stay healthy, both could play all year, and both could still pay off at the ADP. I think this is going to be a good offense. I want pieces of it. And if I can get, backs at this sort of cost that have got the upside of both these guys, I'm really excited. I feel like I've been banging the drum for Zach Moss since, about week 8 last year, where I was saying he's a free agent, someone's going to pay him, go out and buy him in Dynasty while he's dirt cheap, and everyone wants to forget about him. And yeah, look, I really like the contract. Okay, it's not big money, but the Bengals went out and acquired him, paid him competent kind of 1A, 1B money. And I'm really excited about what he could be in this offense behind, maybe the best offensive line since we've seen Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. I think those two tackles, I don't know if there's ever been two bigger tackles in the NFL starting together. They're about 1,000 pounds between them, I think. So yeah, very excited about what he could do in this offense.
How about you, Hayden?
In terms of the contract, he basically is making as much money as Joe Mixon was going to be making. So like that to me is a good sign. So Mixon led the NFL and inside the 5-yard line opportunities per game last year. Did he score on them? No, but that's why they have Zach Moss. I think there is some schematic reasons why, like the shotgun runs, they had a lot of success with that with the Colts last year. And obviously Joe Burrow wants to play from shotgun in general. So there could be some like philosophical schematic reasons why they decided to go with Zach Moss. And I've seen Joe Mixon have 50-point games in this offense. So in terms of ambiguous backfields, I want them when they're attached to projected top 5 offenses. And right now that's exactly what the Bengals are. And it's not like Zach Moss came out of nowhere as like a UDFA. Like there was some hype at one time. He was like constantly banged up, did not look like himself for a couple of seasons there. And obviously that's never good news, but there was some pedigree with him, and like $4.5 million. It's not nothing in the running back market out there. So I think that Chase Brown, watching him, he was to me more of a finesse back. He's like his weight is listed all right, but in terms of his play style, I thought was like not confident in his decision making and not like that physical of a rusher, and didn't play very much until like Travion Williams went down. So I think that Chase Brown's going to be a change of pace back. And I don't think that he's really competing for Zach Moss at the goal line. And that's like really the only thing I'm looking for in this backfield.
I'd also add with Chase Brown, he's had an off season, maybe he's worked on it, but the tape last year, he was one of the worst and most clueless backs in pass pro. So unless that's seen a drastic improvement, and I think at his build, at his size, that's going to be a challenge anyway. I struggle to see a world where the Bengals are trusting him in critical passing situations with, the $200 million man in Joe Burrow. Are they going to want Chase Brown protecting him? No, they're probably going to want Zach Moss on the field. And we know Zach Moss is a competent receiving back, and that's, just another reason why I quite like Zach Moss across.
Yeah, these pocket passer quarterbacks are always getting injured. Let's move on. Javonte Williams, RB29 on Underdog, going at 113th overall, RB29 on Sleeper, but 21 spots higher at 92nd overall. We really see that kind of divide between how the redraft market sees it and then how the best ball market sees it. Javonte is another year removed from his ACL. We know that Russell Wilson led the league in check down rate when kept clean last year, which helped fluff the numbers on the running backs in this backfield. But Bo Nix could be more of the same. Sean Payton, he didn't draft Javonte. We know he's a coach who very much has his guys. Samaje Perine looks like he could be cut during camp. That still leaves Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime as guys that Sean Payton brought in. Hayden, where are you at on Williams and I guess this backfield in general?
0% Javonte for me as well. I like the tier above them. Just like give me the Zach Mosses and all those the David Montgomerys, Pacheco, Jacobs. Like I'll draft 4 of the running backs before Javonte, and then I don't even have to draft another one by that point. With Javonte, he was so inefficient last year. Coming back from the injury, maybe he does look better this year, but that was the only time Sean Payton has seen him, and it did not look pretty. And then they obviously draft Samaje Perine or Audric Estime. And then Jaleel McLaughlin was one of his guys as well. And then this Blake Watson kid might make the roster as well. So I don't really see the upside case with Javonte Williams. Vegas thinks that they're going to project for 52 fewer points than what the Broncos scored last season. Broncos last season were not very good. So that makes this pretty tough. So I think there's a chance Audric Estime takes this job. So there's a couple of ambiguous backfields. I thought Audric Estime was a pretty cool rusher in college, and I think that this could be one of the opportunities where the 17th round, 18th round running back ends up having the job once we get to the fantasy playoffs. And I think there's a chance where Javonte Williams in a contract year means you're out of here by the time the Broncos are eliminated from the playoffs.
Yeah. How about you, Rich? Where you targeting within this backfield?
I'm 20% Audric Estime. Blake Watson was my number one priority UDFA. He was a model standout for me in the rookie draft process. So yeah, I'm all in on Watson and Estime. I just can't get on board with Javonte Williams at the price. I think Hayden summed it up perfectly. We know that Sean Payton, more than probably any other coach in the NFL, loves his guys, and I just don't think Javonte is going to be that. And I wouldn't be shocked if there's a world where we could see potentially Javonte traded, in the offseason. If there's a chance that Sean Payton thinks he's not going to make the roster, can you go and move him for a day 3 pick or something like that to one of these running back needy teams?
That would make sense, like to keep Samaje in pass protection, estimate your early down rusher to like actually trade Javonte. That's a really, really good shout out. I haven't really thought about that.
And if you do that, then you're definitely going to get more for him than you would for Samaje Perine as well. So I love that take. I think that's a great one to have. I struggle to take Javonte Williams when I know Devin Singletary has a fairly clear path, a few picks before him. Gus Edwards after him probably has a fairly clear path, and neither of those are particularly enticing. But I find those committees easier to pass than I do what's going on with the Broncos at the minute. If you want to get a copy of Rich's rookie guide, then hit the join button down below. All our silver tier members get that. It's 180 pages, including Rich's rookie model, which is outstanding. All that sort of stuff, which will get you set up to win. Absolutely worth it. Ty Chandler going at 149th overall on Sleeper as the RB49. Goes 143rd on Underdog as the RB41. Aaron Jones replaced Alexander Mattison as the Vikings RB1. Jones, 29 years old, played only 11 games last year, dealt with a lot of hamstring issues. When Chandler had his opportunities, he did well. He had 4 top 36 weekly finishes out of 5 games where he had 13 plus touches. I like drafting this guy with potential RB3 outcomes if he gets volume. Rich, where are you at on Ty Chandler?
I like him. I think I liked the player. I just don't love the fact that we are going to see him split time with Aaron Jones. And we talked about it earlier. Yes, there's a chance that Aaron Jones is going to get injured. And that's where I kind of hope there's some upside for Ty Chandler. But I just worry that at the cost of where he's going in draft, I think there's other players that have got a clearer path to volume than he has. But if you're looking for a kind of swing for the fences option, we know he's got the athleticism. We know that he's shown when he's got opportunities in this offense, he has absolutely produced. So yeah, there is an upside there. I just think I'd prefer other players in this price range.
How about you, Hayden? When we talk about his price range, it's the Kendre Miller range, Nick Chubb for now at least, Marshawn Lloyd, Rico Dowdle, Zach Charbonnet, Jerome Ford, Austin Eckler, Chase Brown, Zeke Elliott. Would you take Ty Chandler ahead of any of those?
I don't think so. Looking at it, the expected fantasy points, which just like kind of ties up how many targets, how close you are to the goal line, carries, put us all into a number. The Vikings last year were dead last in their combined running back usage. That was because they had some players like Ty Chandler that they didn't want to use. Also, this Vikings team is likely going to be worse than the last year's Vikings team in terms of quarterback play, Jordan Addison suspension, TJ Hawkinson missing time, so on. So yeah, I think the bull case for Ty Chandler is just fading Aaron Jones. Last year, career low, 5.2 yards per touch for Aaron Jones. Negative 18% fantasy points over expected. That was a career low for Aaron Jones. He was brutal at the goal line, which is why I think that the Packers wanted to bring in Josh Jacobs, who's much bigger and is going to score all those touchdowns. And I think part of it is just because he's older, slightly undersized for like a bell cowish back, and he's been banged up. So I think all those reasons are why I'm not drafting any Aaron Jones. It just, it's also just like not making me want to draft a bunch of Ty Chandler just because Kevin O'Connell is going to want to pass the ball so much, and they just like might not be that good this year.
Yeah, I can see that. I think my argument would be, if things go poorly with the quarterback, then I'm just kind of banking on maybe the running backs end up getting more touches, which maybe is poor process from me. But Ty Chandler flashed enough that I think structurally, when I'm in these best ball drafts, Ty Chandler's someone that I get to this point in the draft and I need a RB5 or so before I can get back to drafting wide receivers, or I can start turning my attention to late round stacks, things like that. So Ty Chandler's a fairly easy click for me. I don't think in redraft, he's the kind of back that I'd want to roster, because you could easily sit there for 10, 11 weeks with him on your bench and never be able to start him. And then eventually, by the time the bye weeks get particularly ugly, you drop him, and then all of a sudden Aaron Jones goes out injured. So there's definitely different ways to play this one. Kyren Williams, RB7 on Sleeper, RB8 on Underdog, goes 12 picks earlier on Sleeper at pick 17 compared to 29 on Underdog. I mean, this is last year's breakout running back. The RB2 in points per game, now available as the RB8 in the middle of a third round on Underdog, one of only 2 running backs to average over 95 scrimmage yards per game. CMC, obviously the unquestioned RB1 in drafts, but everyone's concerned with Kyren. Hayden, like, are the public wrong? Should Kyren be going like 3 or 4 spots higher positionally?
I have Kyren as my running back 5 and 16th overall player. Last time I checked, fantasy football is about coming in first or second place. Yeah, he has a downside risk.
Yeah,
so do a lot of other running backs, but he also has a proven upside. We just copy paste what he did last year. And yeah, Blake Corum being in town does matter a little bit. But when I removed Kyren Williams games where he played 80% or more of the snaps, Kyren Williams still averaged 20 touches per game. It was just about the Sean McVay philosophy change, where he has light boxes and he can run right up the middle, and he's got 1,000 pounds of interior linemen. And Kyren Williams is really, really quick in his decision making, and he can get right up field and convert these touchdowns. And the Rams, to me, are one of the most underrated offenses because they were dealing with so many injuries throughout the season. But when they were all healthy together, the Rams were one of the best offenses in the entire NFL. Like, that's like not hyperbole. Like, that is how the numbers played out. And I'm not sure if people are just kind of like overlooking what Kyren Williams did last year. I think people are just so hyper focused on the downside risk, but nobody remembers the season that you finished 6th in your fantasy league. I'm trying to find guys that could get me first round value, and I think that that's exactly what Kyren Williams did.
People kind of forget how much Kyren Williams has also changed schematically what the Rams have been able to do. And part of that's the offensive line, part of it's the scheme. But the Rams were one of those teams for a couple of years who just didn't really want to rush the ball in the red zone. And then last year, he has 55 red zone attempts, which is only 10 fewer than Christian McCaffrey, ranked 4th amongst all running backs. Like, this was a guy who was an integral part of their scheme, even with Puka Nacua having the best rookie wide receiver season of all time. So, yeah, I'm very much in on Kyren. Rich, where do you land on Kyren?
I love Kyren. I can't get my head around how people are valuing him right now, because, this is a guy that finishes an RB1 75% of his games last year. He finishes a top 5 running back 50% of the time last year. He was an absolute league winner last year.
It seems good.
And then we're looking at it, and everybody's just obsessing about the fact that they've added Blake Corum without looking at what else they've done on this offense. As Hayden hinted at, this interior offensive line could be absolutely game-wrecking. Like, they are 3 of the biggest players in the league, and I think teams are going to really struggle with that. You've got an offense that has weapons outside. Teams are going to be scared to single cover Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. You're going to have to pick your poison of, are we going to load the box to try and stop Kyren Williams and this monster interior offensive line, and potentially risk single covering the guys outside? Or are we going to allow extra resources in coverage and then open up to be gashed down the middle? So I think that what the Rams have done this offseason, if anything, to me, reinforces the hype and the hope in Kyren Williams. And I think that, to get him in the second rounds of redraft leagues, if you can go and start a draft with one of these stud wide receivers and then come back and get Kyren Williams in the second. That feels like an absolute cheat code.
Tom, I want to flip this idea because he's going in the third round in underdog. I think that's enough like draft capital or down the board enough where I'm drafting Kyren and Blake Corum on the same damn team and just saying whoever is starting it's Sean McVay wants one player to really handle all of the work because he plays with all of that pace. How do you play with pace? You can't substitute players on and off the field. And Sean McVay doesn't want to have personnel like trends where other defenses kind of game plan and figure things out. He wants the same kind of look and then just being able to do a million different things with it. And that means keeping your running back on the field a ton. So Blake Corum, I think, is like one of the most expensive handcuffs. But if you can promise me I'm going to get the RB1 for Sean McVay's team and I have to trade in a third and a 10th round draft pick for that, I think I would trade a third and 10th round draft pick for back half of a first round draft pick every single time. And I think that's kind of like what I would be getting by handcuffing these two together.
Yeah, and I think structurally, if you zoom out slightly and go, okay, so I'm getting the qualities that we look for in a hero running back, somebody who has legendary upside, somebody who has work in the receiving game, who has the goal line role, and who could see a huge amount of touches. I can get two really good wide receivers. And then when we get to the question mark tier of wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, who is, over 31 years old now, Stephon Diggs, who's in a new offense, DJ Moore, who's dealing with far more talent around him to compete with than ever before, Michael Pittman, who's got Anthony Richardson at quarterback. But instead, I can lock in Kyren Williams as my hero running back and then do whatever I need to structurally. I can take elite tight ends. I can take an elite quarterback. I can hammer the wide receiver position, still hit that sort of pick 72 to 108 where the running backs are really good, grab another two, and then maybe as my RB4, take Blake Corum. I'm absolutely fine locking down a backfield like that. I know that over the years we've gone back and forth on whether handcuffing is good or bad. But in best ball, I think you can build around that and you can say Kyren Williams is a little fragile and he might miss time, but I'm also betting that if he comes back, he's going to go straight back into this role that he had last year that was incredible for fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there would be a chance where if you Kyren, like, he missed like 4 games last year. If you time that correctly and his advance rate dips low enough, and then he comes back for the finals, and then now you have a low owned, or the inverse where like Kyren's the guy that you needed. Then in week 15 you miss his time, and now all of a sudden Corum is now going to be the guy that you need. There could be like some advance rate reasons why those two kind of get paired together there. So yeah, I think the handcuffing becomes harder if it's like your first round draft pick. But I think that the difference between first and third round draft picks is so drastic that I think this is like as expensive of a running back duo that I'd be willing to handcuff together. But that just like kind of goes back to like how much faith I have in Sean McVay and the Rams in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all our running backs we had to talk about. Hayden, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you back here in the Fantasy Sanctuary. I know you and Josh are grinding hard over on Underdog Fantasy's YouTube page, which is linked in the description below. And anyone who's not subscribed absolutely should be. Is there anything in particular you guys have got coming that the people should be looking out for?
We actually studied the kickoff rule today. So we recorded a video, the NFL kickoff rule. Sean did this like crazy in-depth look at the XFL and the strategies that the kick returns and the kickoff teams are deploying. We kind of reached some interesting conclusions. So we took a break for fantasy football content. We have a ton of fantasy football content if you want that. But yeah, we did like 40 minutes on like the X's and O's of the NFL kickoff rule. So it might be the most in-depth kickoff rule video on the planet. So if you're interested on that, we have that. And then if you just want the rankings and stuff, we got plenty of videos for that too.
See, now this is just a week late because about a week ago we had some very in-depth conversations about the kickoff rule in our Discord, all because of Scott Fishbowl, where you get insane levels of points for kick returners. So that's definitely a video that our Discord members will be all over. For Hayden, Rich, myself, we appreciate you watching. Stay tuned to the channel for more content that will help you win in 2024. Leave us a comment. Tell us which of these players we're wildly wrong on. I want to hear. I want you to try and convince me. We will be back very, very soon.